Hello friends and freundins, and welcome to another episode of the awesome Troglodyte channel. Today I will try to make a diorama in which I will integrate the Horch 4x4 tip 1A which I made in the two previous episodes. I imagined this scene taking place on a Greek island, and I also wanted to include a very old traditional chapel for some reason. A chapel that was partially built with stones taken from the ancient structure which once stood in its place. So after I cut a rectangular XPS block of foam, I made some rough sketches of where I wanted everything to be placed. I elevated the top left side of the diorama a little bit because I thought the ancient ruined base with the church on top of it would look more glorious positioned on a small hill. Then I measured where the steps that lead to the church would be positioned. I glued the little hill and the stone base in place and secured them with toothpicks. Then I tried to cut the shape of steps with my foam cutter. It didn't turn out amazing, but that's okay because they're supposed to be ancient stones anyways. After I was done, I started shaping the base. First I rolled my aluminum ball on all of the surfaces. Then I drew the gaps between the stones with my pencil and made them a little bit irregular, occasionally using my X-Acto knife. Personally, I love this procedure, and the fact that they are ancient ruins gives you the advantage of covering any potential mistakes easily. Once the base was done, I glued it in place and continued with the rest of the steps. Which I also shaped with the pencil and made them lead right to the door of the church. I also glue some stones on the base of the hill, trying to give the idea that some part of the stone platform has collapsed at some point. Then I made the exposed rocks on the sides of the hill, and for this I used aluminium foil which I glued on the sides and shaped it in a way that would look realistic. In order to close off all of the existing gaps and make the foil harder and more endurant, I covered it with Mod Podge. By the time it dried, I had decided to make my diorama a little bit wider, in order for the stone base to be able to accommodate both part of the chapel and the bell tower. So I added a few centimeters more on the side where the structure would be placed upon. But I also cut a few centimeters off on the right side of the diorama. I had enough space to place my vehicle and I didn't want the whole thing to be too large for no reason. Then I started constructing the building, which I gave a relatively simple shape because it was made by relatively simple monks. Once I had the general shape of the structure finished, I put it aside and started working on the ground surface in front of the church. I covered it with putty and then I positioned rocks, pebbles and stones all around, mostly close to the slopes of the hill. At this point, I made the frame of my diorama, for which I used thin balsa wood. I cut it carefully all around, I sanded it with some sandpaper and then glued it on its place. Any gaps or imperfections I would fill in later with putty or cut them off with an X-Acto knife. And once that was done, my diorama immediately began to look much more promising. So, after I masked the area where the church will be positioned, I covered the hill and the ground below it entirely with earth elements such as stones, small rocks and dirt. And in order to keep everything in place, before I would position it, I would cover the area with a coat of Mod Podge. So far, everything looks nice. So now it was time to start shaping the main structure of this scene. First, I cut the door and a window on the side. And then I started drawing all of the stones on the surfaces. In some places I would push the stones inwards with the back of my pencil, just like I did before with the stones of the base. And in other places I would do the opposite by placing a thin slice of XPS foam in the shape of a stone. This way one gets the impression that some of the stones are sticking out of the wall. I made the base of the roof from cardboard, and then I made the stones that serve as shingles from thin slices of XPS foam, which I cut and shaped individually. This is a very old school way that they used to make roofs. I thought it would be a good idea, and I also found a few pictures of chapels having been built that way on the internet. After they were ready, I would put them inside a plastic container together with some real rocks and shake well. This way they will get a nice stone-looking texture. Then I will position them, glue them in place, and afterwards I will give each one individually some more texture with my pencil or with an X-Acto knife. Then I will close the unwanted gaps with some filler and cover everything with Mod Podge. Now it was time for the main attraction of this scene, the bell tower. I looked at some reference photos for inspiration, took some rough measurements, and proceeded with the construction of something that would look like a bell tower seated upon a couple of ancient marble pillars. The pillars I made the way you see here, although they ended up looking anything but the way I imagined them. Which is alright, because, as I said before, these are ancient ruins. So with this as an excuse, I can turn any imperfection into erosion through time. So the bell tower you will see a little bit later because I lost the final shot. But over here I'm making the cross that goes on top of the church roof. Next, I made an old wooden door and a small window. I also rectified an issue that I had with the roof, because previously I made it a little bit shorter than it should have been. Now the small chapel was finished and it was ready to be glued in its position. So far everything looked okay and everything was in place except for the bell tower. And of course I needed to make a bell. I took a marker, which I thought its tip resembled a bell. I melted some plastic with the help of a candle, put it on top of the tip and pulled downwards. Once it gets cold, it will maintain this shape, which I can make more hard and resilient by applying Mod Podge inside and all around. While I was waiting for that to dry, I positioned the bell tower and made the whole structure stronger with the help of two metallic supports that I placed between the columns and the wall of the church. I feel they add a little bit of realism to the construction of this weird building as a whole. Next, I sealed any gaps between the building and its base with Mod Podge and then covered it with dirt, stones and pebbles. Finally, once I got the bell ready, I positioned it in place, and that was it. The construction of my diorama is finished. Now I only have to paint it, weather it, paint the figures, position them, position the vehicle, and I am done. I also have a nice short story behind this diorama, and also a title. But I will talk more about this on the next episode. For now, I want to thank you for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed watching this build and found it somewhat useful. If you did, you can like my video and leave me a comment. And I would also be very happy if you subscribe. Thanks again, friends and freundins, and we will see each other in the next episode.